I'm actually doing a video on one of my numerous teenage crushes. Is it a way for me to tell you that I'm biased? Come on. A few days ago, I asked my Instagram followers if they knew who Jack Harries was, and actually most of them said no, which made me wonder if I should actually make a video on him. But so yeah, today I want to talk about a public figure I've been following for more than a decade now. I sound like such a creep. I'm not a creep, I promise. I wanted to make this video because his story is, in some aspects, quite similar to mine. It's the story of a political awakening, and so I do believe Jack's journey is inspiring, especially for those who have found comfort in calling themselves apolitical. It's hard for me to remember exactly when I started watching YouTube and how I ended up on this platform in the first place. What I remember though is that I completely fell into the British crew niche. Zoella, Alfie Days, Cappelleyt, Joe Sugg, Marcus Butler, Tanya Burr, Jim Chapman, and later Naomi Smart. And then on the other side of the Atlantic there was Casey Neistat. And at the intersection of the two, there was Jack's Gap. YouTube became such a big deal in the 2010s, some channel grew exponentially, and one of those channels was Jack's Gap. Jack's Gap was founded in 2011 during Jack's Gap year, and the pair of twins became a YouTube sensation with their signature Southern British accent, their charisma and cute faces. It's no surprise that more than 80% of their audience at the time identified as female. Jack's Gap cultivated its image outside the British crew as they produced less personal, more creative type of content. But given how engagement dropped as soon as their personality changed, I still strongly believe that it is their personality and their faces that attracted viewers more than the quality of the content. The twins looked and sounded like London hipsters to be. They had a specific aesthetic that made them stand out while still heavily relying on that stereotype of the urban indie. In 2015, Jack's Gap released a video on climate change that ultimately made the channel shift towards environmentalism, activism, and the fight for climate justice. Videos were longer, more technical. Jack's Gap no longer was the quirky, cheesy, non-political channel we knew. Some embraced that change, but a lot of people also left. Jack then turned to other social media, Instagram, to grow his movement. He also met his partner, Alice, a documentary, photographer, and filmmaker interested in the migrant crisis. The two started working together on mobilizing people around the climate crisis and the social injustices that it brought by getting involved with the organization Choose Love and recently creating their own studio and Instagram page. On an individual level, Jack, and now Alice, continued to behave like influencers, posting selfies, photo shoots of themselves, as that's what followers also expect from them. I mean, these two have it all. They're cute, they live in a cool city, they're activists, they are digital nomads, they remain the archetype of the trendy urban hipster or indie. Given his upbringing, his parents' output and political activism, so his habitus, but also the content he has produced from 2010 to 2015, you can tell that Jack was the typical middle-class, upper-middle-class, apolitical kid growing up in a progressive household. Being in that type of privileged position, I guess there are three different routes opening to you. One, you purposely use that privilege for your personal growth in a way that will further increase inequalities. 2. You're conscious of that privilege but don't really do anything about it. 3. You're conscious of that privilege and you actively try to deconstruct that and be the best ally possible. I would actually add 2 subsections to the third part. 3A, you turn into a massive virtue signaler or white savior. 3B, you're open to criticism, recognize your hypocrisy, you learn, you amplify the voices of those who are oppressed, and don't pretend to know better than them. In fact, it's hard to know to which subsections the influencer activist belonged to, because he's ultimately seeking 2 objectives, the growth of his movement, but also the growth of his personal image, his influence. The problem is, and Sarah then made me realize this in her latest video on the downfall of dystopian teen movies, people aren't interested in the white savior trope anymore. In the past decade, we have realized that change does not come from individual action, but from collective action. Diverse, grassroots collective of people. The movie Get Out, released in 2017 as the movement Black Lives Matter grew all over the US, even argued that the white indie liberal can actually be the villain. Now, when you look at the evolution of Jack's content and his new series called A Seat at the Table, meaning bringing people from diverse backgrounds and ethnicities to the table, you see that he understood that he had to refrain from using the white savior trope and step back a little to let other people talk, for the survival of his movement, but more importantly for the survival of his influence, his image. And I don't want to be too harsh on him, because I think that change was quite genuine. Jack has always enjoyed sharing other people's stories, as you can tell from his preceding theories, the shed sessions in his garden shed, or following Heart, etc. YouTube is a platform that ultimately forces the personal, and it makes sense. YouTube is a visual platform, which makes it so much easier to build connections with your audience when compared to non-visual platforms. We've already talked about the three main components of a convincing argument, a convincing speech: ethos, credibility; logos, logic; and pathos, emotion. And it's pretty clear that seeing the creator, seeing the person, their emotions on their face, hearing from them their personal anecdotes or the stories of their lives will enhance that pathos element. In the realm of documentaries, the naturalistic, interview-based approach is becoming more and more popular, as people don't want to hear about ground narratives or statistical reports. They want to learn about people, their lives, their experience. When you watch a documentary like Cowspiracy starring Kip Anderson, who more recently produced Seaspiracy, directed by Ali Tabrizi, you tend to get that the directors try to go as close as possible to the people who are suffering or the workers working in those big industries. But when I watched Seaspiracy, I noticed something different, something new, that you can also find in Jack's videos, and I want to call that the self-made scientist or self-made expert. When I say self-made, I mean someone who is not qualified to be a scientist but has done enough research to call themselves an expert. In Seaspiracy, Ali Tabrizi is present throughout the whole duration of the documentary. He helps connect the different parts of it with one-to-one segments, holding the camera as a YouTuber, a vlogger. And he also shows himself researching the information on the internet. What you get from that documentary is that, of course, the seafood industry is really, really bad, but also that Ali went from I don't know a lot about this topic, but I'm interested in it, to, at the end of the documentary, I'm an expert at it, implying that you can do that too. In fact, YouTube is full of self-made scientists, self-made experts, whatever niche you pick. Health and fitness YouTube, commentary YouTube, educational channels, etc. Jack himself dropped out from university and does not have any sort of expertise in the field of sustainability. He's simply a human being who read, who learned, who researched by himself and then shared the information he collected. By sharing his experience as a self-made expert, Jack encourages his viewers to think critically and to challenge big companies work-washing to do their own research. Now, the rise of the self-made experts also have negative sides to it, as some people will start believing in the worst conspiracy theories because they saw this article on the internet that said that the earth was flat. Luckily, people like Jack Harries or Ali Tabrizi rely on sources that have been verified, that are peer-reviewed by the scientific community or are produced by trusty newspapers. It doesn't come out of nowhere. Actually, I'll probably do another video on the pros and cons of the self-made experts. This new trend is quite interesting actually, especially on commentary YouTube. But yeah, Jack is kinda putting a cute face on tons and tons of research papers and statistical reports on the climate crisis. He's a medium between the information and us. He uses his pretty privilege to earn a pretty good living, yes, but also to get people who don't really care about climate change to learn more about it and lead them to follow other activists. It is sad to say that, and that needs to change, but people don't listen the same way to a white middle-class man, or a person of colour, a woman of colour, or indigenous activists. It's cool now, but let's pretend for the aesthetic. Throughout his journey on YouTube, Jack has participated in projects that were pretty much all sponsored, In the YouTube bubble, there are two different types of sponsorships. Small integrations, that's what I do. I'll talk about the sponsor for a minute, but then the sponsor does not have any power on the rest of the video. I decide what I want to talk about. And then there are full integrations where the video is actually an ad, and the sponsor will have power over anything you say in the video. Tom Nicholas recently released a video exposing the limits and dangers of full integrations. Jack benefits from sponsors in a different way though. He doesn't promote a product or service, but he relies on the sponsor to fund his project, his video. In a way, the sponsor is both invisible and omnipresent. Invisible because they usually don't have anything to do with the content that is being produced, but omnipresent because the realization of the project depends on them. So Jack better not go against their interest. And that, for me, is the reason why Jack will never say what has to be said. Because he wants to remain as consensual as possible, the least political possible. When a combination of YouTube, owned by Google, and a bank financially support a series on the climate crisis, do you really believe that that will go anywhere? That it will bring something new to the table? Unsurprisingly, they talked about fossil fuels, having a vegan diet, growing food in underground farms. And yes, it's good to talk about those things, but come on. Like, we're so late, we need to be way more radical than that. Gosh, that Tesla. I hate Teslas. I hate Elon Musk. Ruining my video. It's no surprise that Jack chose to stand with Extinction Rebellion, which famously stated that they do not trust any political ideology. In other words, they don't want to get mingled with political parties or politics in general. I'm not gonna lie, I always get very frustrated when I hear people or movements say that they are apolitical. Not that we should all be activists or anti-capitalists, but saying that you do not care about politics, or that you don't want to get too political, ultimately means that you do not care about the people. Politics come from the Greek polis, which means the city, but more than the geography of the city, it's about the people that live in it. As it was explained in this episode of Sit at the Table, communities living in southeast London, many of whom are black, first or second generation migrants, suffer the most from air pollution. They die from it. In another series, The Breakdown, sponsored this time by his studio, Earthrise, and a free media platform dedicated to climate change and nature, Jack left the plant-based diets and the rooftop farms, so the individual-focused solutions, to adopt an intersectional approach to environmentalism, which means that one recognizes that we don't suffer the consequences of climate change equally. We keep on talking about fossil fuels and showing the faces of all companies' leaders, but ultimately we live in a system that promotes this type of murderous behaviors. I think it's time we actually talk about the elephant in the room. Capitalism has brought slavery and then switched to coal when machines became more productive than enslaved people. It then moved to fossil fuels and now renewable energies. You see, throughout history, capitalism has always managed to turn new great ideas into new forms of inequalities. So if we want to live a better world, not just a livable world, we need to be more radical than that. And I want to believe that Jack would like to be more radical if he wasn't chained by capitalist institutions. That's it for today, but it would be a shame if my humble contribution to the COP26, whatever importance it still has, was on a white middle-class man. So I would like to highlight the contributions to the environmentalist movement of amazing women, women of colour, people of colour in general, indigenous activists who are on the front line. You'll find a bunch of resources, book resources, articles, Instagram accounts that help me learn more about the climate crisis and better act upon it as well. It was a lighter one today as I'm working on a more elaborate video for next week. Nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, we can continue the discussion in the comment section. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, if it's not done already. I would also like to thank my Patreons for their support. A special thank to Joshua, James, Carla and Prince. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Salut!